Just because you gave us $200,000, it doesn't mean we owe you anything.
My eldest son's wife berated me like this, even though I had fully covered the cost of their new house. Looking back 15 years to when my husband died, it was a very difficult time to raise children as a single mother. Bankruptcy of Lehman Brothers had been causing the waves of recession gradually. Despite an increasing number of dual-income households, there were almost no job opportunities for me other than part-time work at that time. The idea of full-time employment was a distant dream. After overcoming those hard times and escaping from poverty, I bought a new apartment for my eldest son and his wife. However, rather than showing gratitude, my eldest son's wife was continually disrespectful. Now, she has the audacity to insult me. At my wit's end, I asked my son, "Don't you have anything to say when your mother is being treated so badly?" But his indifferent response was, "See what happens when you stop paying." Seeing his attitude, something inside me snapped, and I gladly declared, "Well then, I will," and stopped all payments. And as a result, I am Emma. I am currently 53 years old, a single mother who raised 2 boys by myself. I got married when I was 20. I gave birth to my eldest son, Edward, when I was 22, and 3 years later I gave birth to my second son, George. Back then, I was living happily with my kind and family-oriented husband. My husband, who worked for a small to medium-sized enterprise, wasn't a high earner, so as a housewife, I used to ride my bicycle to the neighboring town to buy the cheapest groceries I could find it in the flyers. Stir-fried vegetables were a staple for dinner before payday. And on payday, we'd have grilled meat. Our dinner menu reflected our financial situation. By the time our second son, George, turned 3, my husband and I were saying it would be nice to have a girl next. But then, my husband died in a car accident. The day before the accident, we were talking about names. Mary, to grow into a child who smiles adorably, and if it's not a girl, Matthew, following the names of our first and second sons. My husband didn't have life insurance, and our family's life changed drastically when the income stopped. The childbirth savings we had saved for our third child quickly ran out, and I worked day and night. However, full-time employment was hard to find. Women with 2 children were often relegated to part-time work. Moreover, the hourly wage was only about $7 during the day. And even at night, it barely reached $9. I could have earned more in the nightlife industry, but at the time, I was a mother of 2 elementary school kids, so I was against such work that required using my sexuality to cater to drunken customers. As a part-time worker, of course, I didn't receive any bonuses or other forms of extra income. Just making ends meet every month was a struggle, and any unexpected expenses were a real burden. I was able to provide for my son Edward's necessities, but for my other son George, I couldn't even afford a school backpack. As a result, George was bullied at school, and Edward was also made fun of. Desperate to increase my income, I turned to the computer that my late husband had bought and started searching for ways to earn money in my spare time. Affiliate marketing. Maybe I can do this in my free time. So, I started a blog titled Single Mom's Child Rearing Struggles, where I subtly placed links to product advertisements. This is what affiliate marketing is, earning an income simply by doing this. I casually started this side job, hoping to add a few hundreds of dollars to my monthly living expenses, and to my surprise, it was a big hit. Whether it was the title Single Mom's Child Rearing Struggles or if I had a knack for writing, I don't know, but my blog quickly ranked high in popularity. From then on, a surprising amount of money started to be deposited into my account every month. As a result of my blog being featured in online articles and magazines, I even started getting requests for lectures. Although I had started affiliate marketing in desperation, before I knew it, I had become known as the queen of affiliate marketing. I then quit my day and night part-time jobs and made affiliate marketing my main job, hosting lectures and side job seminars. As a result, my income dramatically increased, and I started living a lifestyle so luxurious it was as if the times when I couldn't even afford to buy George a school backpack were a lie. But as I started to be able to buy whatever my children desired, our family's balance gradually began to crumble. Going from a life of poverty to a life without any inconveniences, Edward started to go out and enjoy himself extravagantly. As a result, Edward could not move up to his final year of high school and had to repeat a year. Then, saying that he didn't want to repeat grade 11 twice, he dropped out of school. After that, Edward began to hang out in the nightlife district with a friend who had also dropped out and started mingling with bad company. Looking back now, I regret how foolish I was as a mother. Perhaps I got carried away with finally escaping a difficult life and was intoxicated by the days of receiving praise at lectures held across Japan. I have a lecture now, so I'll be gone for a while. Please buy something you like with this money and have something good to eat. Being called a teacher by those around me, I would speak in front of over 100 people about my success story with blogging and affiliate marketing and receive applause. Although it was as busy as when I was working part-time without any breaks, the sense of accomplishment was incomparable. However, I was not able to be there for my sons as they were going through their important phase of adolescence, and I ended up giving money to Edward whenever he asked. As Edward started to get arrested by the police more frequently, there were times when George warned me.
It's not right for you to simply give money to him. He's being exploited by his friends for money.
In contrast to Edward, George was living a diligent student life. George, who started to despise and distance himself from those who discriminated or bullied him, since the incident with his school backpack, grew up to be a child with strong sense of justice and compassion. They, leading totally different lives, were not on good terms.
You should make him work properly.
It was George who said this when Edward had passed his 20th birthday. Edward, who had dropped out of high school and had been idle for 3 years, would quit as soon as he got a part-time job. Watching Edward aimlessly helping his bad companions must have worried George as a younger brother. So I asked a friend for a favor and got Edward a job at a publishing company through a connection. However, Edward didn't last long at the publishing company either, and was eventually fired for repeatedly coming late without notice and not showing up at all. It was very frustrating for me, as this was a publisher that had been very helpful, turning my blogs and success stories into books. I had to go and apologize because of my over 20-year-old son's irresponsibility. But in return, they apologized, saying our guidance was not sufficient. In the end, it left a bitter experience, and was a time that benefited no one.
I guess I'm not fit to be used by others, so I want to try something on my own.
And so, Edward, ignoring his own lack of perseverance, finally started talking about starting his own business. I invested in him and he started an import business, but in the end, after just going on sightseeing trips to Los Angeles, Paris, Australia, and Hong Kong, we had to withdraw at a big loss.
I have a lot of good friends, so I think I'll be successful.
The next thing he got involved in was network marketing. For the sake of him, I also bought pots and water purifiers, but this too didn't last. And to make matters worse, the relationship between the brothers became the worst when Edward registered George as a member without his consent. It turned out that Edward had been using George's name and selling pots and water purifiers even to George's friends, so George and I had to spend time apologizing. Despite all this, Edward started dating a woman he met through this network business and began talking about getting married and working, thinking that getting married and starting a family might finally make him walk responsibly. I supported him again. I bought a new condominium for their new home. The two, who had just quit network marketing, didn't even have a wedding ceremony because their life was still unstable. Then they said they wanted to open a wine bar in New York as a couple. So I decided to provide the startup capital. Edward had already turned 30. Now that he had a wife, he couldn't keep living off his parents forever. Considering that he had given up many times, even though I had introduced him to jobs and provided startup capital in the past, this time Edward and I decided to open the shop as a corporation where both of us hold representative rights. For this joint management, I repeatedly emphasized that this was the last warning and there would be no next time. However, my earnest thoughts did not reach him. Edward was bragging that he could get good wine at a low price through his import connections. But no matter how I looked at it, it seemed like he was just having a nightly drinking party with his friends.
Mom? Please bring your friends to drink sometimes.
Whenever I visited the bar, my tipsy daughter-in-law would brazenly say this.
That's right. If you don't do some marketing once in a while, this bar will go under. After all, you're also an executive.
Seeing him, drunk and laughing sloppily, I was speechless with disbelief. As his mother, I could still bear his irresponsible words. But I found nothing but disgust for the attitude of his wife.
My family is super wealthy, you know. Though I might not look like it, I'm a lady from a good family. So, I can help out if you're in trouble with money.
Holding an empty wine bottle, she uttered her usual favorite phrase. I'd only met her parents once, when we introduced ourselves for the marriage, and they did not give off an air of wealth at all. Above all, the imposing figure of her older brother Kevin, who seemed to run the show, left a stronger impression.
I've always wanted a big brother, so I'm happy to.
Edward, who was oddly fond of his brother-in-law, gave me an uneasy feeling. A few months after his shop opened, it was posting losses of thousands of dollars every month, and all the startup capital I had prepared was completely depleted. Despite me making up for the monthly deficit, Edward and his wife showed no signs of urgency or worry. Now, what to do? Distraught, I decided to consult my younger son, George. Although he had been avoiding Edward since the network business incident, he kindly listened to my concerns and said, I've been worried about something for a while too. Let me look into it. A week later, I visited Edward's shop again. It was nearing the end of the month, and the deadline for the rent and utilities was fast approaching. I needed to check this month's sales and fill in the shortfall. It was past 9 p.m. The shop should have been at its busiest, but the only people there were Edward's brother-in-law's group, with Edward and his wife getting drunk at the same table. How many times have I seen this scene since the shop opened? With a heavy sigh, I approached Edward. If things continue like this, I'll have to close this shop, I told him calmly. The person who responded immediately to my words was not him, but someone else.
Why are you making such a scary face? You can also help by bringing your acquaintances here for drinks, can't you?
Her slurred speech was simply repulsive. You said you'd work hard with Edward, didn't you? What is this situation? I didn't want to talk to her anymore, but I couldn't keep quiet under these circumstances. Why are they getting drunk with Kevin's friends every single day? I decided to confront them about it today. I didn't expect a satisfying answer from my clearly intoxicated daughter-in-law, but instead, it was the brother-in-law who opened his mouth.
What are you talking about? If you close the shop, it will only damage your own reputation. After all, you're a joint representative.
He spoke in a domineering tone, lounging back on the sofa, showing no respect for his elders or relatives.
You're just a nouveau riche who doesn't know how to use money. That's why we're spending it for you. What's wrong with that?
Bombarded with unbelievable words, I finally became emotional. An exchange of heated words ensued, and I finally said, "I'm the one who provided the money to open this store and for your apartment. How can you say such terrible things? After my husband's death, I had a sense of guilt for causing my children to experience hardships. And now that we were financially stable, I had been indulging them. But I couldn't stand the insults from my eldest son's wife, to whom I had paid for their new apartment. Then, she brazenly said, 'I don't feel obliged for a mere $200,000. Can't you say something when your mother is being treated like this?' I lashed out at Edward, who remained silent even as his real mother was being insulted in front of him.
Then, try stopping the payments.
Without even looking at me, Edward, with his face red from being drunk, said this. And something inside me snapped. I'd be happy to do just that. Leaving those words behind, I left the shop. As I exited through the door, I heard her shouting in a loud voice, as if to make sure I heard her.
If you think you can do it, then try.
A few days had passed. At the turn of the month, I was told by them to come to the store. Probably, they were being collected from various sides, because I did not make the end-of-month payment.
I'll go with you.
Reassuringly, George agreed to accompany me. And so, I visited the shop at 1 p.m. I deliberately chose a time when that couple would not be drunk, thinking it would be an important discussion. When I entered the shop, Edward and his wife were there. So was Kevin. The first to speak was Kevin.
What's the matter? Is that guy your bodyguard today?
Seeing George, who came with me, he asked in a mocking tone. He must have wanted to check.
That guy is my younger brother.
When Edward said that, Kevin nodded slightly as if he understood. I was relieved because his speech was clear, as he didn't seem to be drinking today. What's bothering me is that only Edward's wife and her brother are sitting on the sofa, and Edward is still standing.
What's your intention? You haven't even paid the rent or utilities?
Kevin started talking with a thud, resting his feet on the table. I lost my temper at his totally outrageous behavior and snapped back at him, "That's none of your business." But George stepped in, saying, "No, let's proceed. It's not completely unrelated."
Let me introduce myself again. I am George, an attorney. I am going to sue Millie and Kevin, who claims to be her brother, for fraud and embezzlement.
When George calmly conveyed the matter, the three of them exchanged puzzled looks.
When did you become a lawyer?
George was still a high school student when that network business issue caused a rift between the brothers. Since then, Edward and George hadn't had a chance to talk with each other, so Edward had no idea what George was doing.
Firstly, Millie, you and Edward are living together in the apartment purchased by our mother, and you're working together in the store financed by her. However, since you haven't actually submitted a marriage certificate yet, your arrangement is considered a de facto marriage.
Ignoring Edward's question, George continued talking.
Wait, we haven't submitted our marriage certificate yet.
Edward asked Millie surprisingly. Well, about that, she stammered, settling back down on the sofa. As I was thinking that this must have been what George was researching before, it seemed that there was more. He smoothly continued his words, as if he had prepared for this.
In addition to that, Millie, you have been in an intimate relationship with Kevin for a long time, and you were cohabiting with him right before you started living with my brother.
After hearing it, Edward startled in surprise.
Wait, is it true, bro?
Annoyed by Edward's clueless reaction, I couldn't help but glare at him.
And are you not staying at Kevin's house several times a week even now? This means you are in a state of de facto marriage with him as well. You have deceived Emma and Edward and used them for your money-making. This can be interpreted as a fraud charge.
She, my eldest son's wife, was thrown into disarray by George's words. She confronted Kevin, who was sitting next to her.
Wait a minute. What does this mean? Kevin, didn't you say that it wouldn't be a crime as long as we were just deceiving Edward?
Millie, out of sorts with George's words, admitted in front of us that she had deceived Edward at Kevin's instruction. It was as if she was admitting to the crimes pointed out by George. She was so simple-minded that I was just astounded.
Kevin and Millie, both of you faked a relationship with the intention of earning money. Emma would not have bought an apartment if she knew the truth. So you owe her monetary damages.
George, who did not overlook their words and actions, pointed out even further. At this point, there should be no way out for them. Wait a minute. That wasn't my intention. I apologize for what I've done. Kevin, finally understanding the situation, radically changed his attitude and started to apologize. Moreover, he even got down from the sofa and prostrated himself.
You say so, but aren't you reselling the expensive wine you bought in this store on your personal website? That's embezzlement, and it's pretty severe.
I was impressed that George, who had previously asked to see the account books of the store, had examined them in such detail.
Please, don't press charges. I'm currently on probation, and that would be troublesome.
Probation. Just as I was questioning this, George quickly gave me the answer.
Probation. You're talking about the suspended sentence from the marriage scam you committed with Millie before. The previous case ended with the settlement because it was your first offense, and luckily you received a suspended sentence. But this time, the sentences should be cumulative. Well, serves you right.
So that's what it is? He had been caught for the same crime before. Hey, what about me then? As I was beginning to understand George's explanation, Millie interjected.
You are also currently on probation, so you might not be free until you're older than my mother's current age.
I am 53 years old, and she is in her 30s. Can there really be a sentence of more than 20 years?
In the case of a reoffense during probation, your previous sentence is added. An additional 5 years. Furthermore, with this case, we have evidence of embezzlement, fraud, and monetary damages, so you'd better be prepared.
I don't understand the details, and perhaps George is being overly harsh. But it seems certain that these are serious crimes. The two of them, finally seeming to grasp the gravity of the situation, bowed before us in silence.
So, I was a victim of fraud, wasn't? Thanks, George, you saved me.
Whether he feels reassured by declaring himself a victim, Edward casually thanked George.
While I'll press criminal charges against these two, I'm considering a civil lawsuit against you.
When George announced this coldly, Edward, who had been cheerful until now, pathetically yelled,
What the hell is that? It's too complicated for me to understand.
Then George declared that despite being one of the business associates, he would seek damages for the store that ignored profits, as dictated by Kevin. Further, he stated that Edward had turned a blind eye to Kevin's smuggling of expensive wines, and warned, if you don't change, you could be criminally charged for this as well. Ultimately, the three of them all knelt down together, pleading, "Please spare us," to George. And I didn't get a chance to do anything. It seems that from the network business incident, George knew about Millie and had heard bad rumors about her. George, while studying law at university and working part-time at a detective agency, had been continually searching for contacts who could assist him in investigations after he passed the bar exam. After graduating from university, he continued to work at the detective agency while taking the bar exam, which he brilliantly passed last year, achieving his dream of becoming a lawyer. It seems that even though he is a newcomer, his investigative abilities are highly valued. His planning and execution skills are so impressive that even I, his mother, am taken aback. George, who suffered unprovoked bullying as a child, grew up to be an adult with a strong sense of justice, calmness, and a capacity for action. It's hard to believe that he and Edward are brothers. It's all due to my mistake in raising them. I am grateful to George for taking Edward's behavior as a negative example. Several years later, George ultimately didn't press charges against the three. Or rather, it seems he hasn't pressed charges yet. According to him, there are several years until the statute of limitations for public prosecution in fraud cases, so there's no need to rush since we have plenty of evidence. George also told the three that he'd watch how they behave if they genuinely reflect and change their hearts. I'm not familiar with the law, so I didn't understand how it differed from a threat. But the three have changed so much since then that it's laughable. Millie is currently working as a live-in staff at a nursing home. She has cut her hair and nails and works hard every day without makeup, sweating. Then, Kevin became a priest apprentice at the church. He's still in the middle of training, from morning till night doing cleaning and chores. He must be really scared of being sued. Edward, who I was most worried about, has since severed ties with Millie and Kevin and is running the wine bar alone. It seems that he really did have connections for personal imports and is able to stock good wines cheaply. Inspired by George's growth, he seems to be working hard for now. After all, it's a prime location in New York that I chose. Even if it doesn't boom, it's hard to imagine a huge deficit if you just work steadily. Recently, it seems to be gradually recognized as a place where you can drink good wine. Plus, every month, he accurately transfers the amount listed in the pledge written by George to me. If I can see a little more sincereness, and can truly believe that Edward has changed his heart, it might be good to have a launch party. Then, in my speech at the party, I'm thinking of using a book about the twists and turns of this wine bar, which I'm planning to write.